The humid buzz of midday in Chang'an, the capital of the Tang Empire, wraps itself around you like a silken shawl. It is the 27th year of Emperor Xuanzang's reign, and the streets brim with a confidence befitting a golden age. You move slowly, not from fatigue but reverence. For each cobbled alley in the city breathes a memory of poets, courtiers, laborers, and secret whispers under parasol shade. Your feet guide you toward West Market, the pulse of trade and novelty. Amidst the scent of lacquered sandalwood, the hawking cries of Persian merchants, and the high-pitched negotiations of silk dealers, there lies a modest tea-house tucked between a bookseller's stall and a brass incense vendor. The establishment bears no ostentatious signboard, only a worn silk banner painted with the characters Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, fragrant tea and sounds of writing. It is not a tea house for emperors, nor even for ministers, but it is one for the men and women who write the court's orders, draft tax ledgers, and copy sutras for temple offerings. It is a place of daily importance, small, slow, uneventful, perfectly ordinary. The arrival. You step over the raised wooden threshold and are enveloped in cool shadows. Reed screens diffuse the sunlight, painting golden grids upon the oiled floor. The air is filled with the aroma of roasted tea leaves, plum blossoms in a brass basin, and inkstones ground earlier that morning. A boy of perhaps 9 nods at you, silently acknowledging your entry, as he dries porcelain cups with the care of a miniature scholar. At the corner table, an elderly man scribbles on rice paper, tongue protruding slightly in concentration. A scholar, no doubt, though not one with great fortune, his robe patched but clean, his bamboo penholder tied with silk ribbon. Across from him, a woman with the posture of a court scribe but the sandals of a commoner listens with mild interest. Their tea is nearly cold. The tea-house is silent except for murmured verse and the clink of porcelain. And this is precisely what draws you and dozens like you day after day. A Tang tea house, its purpose and patrons. While one may imagine tea as the elixir of dynastic sages and emperors' guests, its everyday consumption shaped an empire. Under the Tang, tea became more than medicinal, it became social. Yet here, it is not laughter or flirtation that fills the air. Instead, it is the slow rhythm of contemplation. You do not come for amusement. You come to observe, to reflect, to prepare for another day of transcribing imperial reports in cramped government quarters. The patrons vary. One corner is perpetually occupied by a courier, his boots dusty and his mouth perpetually dry. He never stays long, just enough to gulp his tea and share a road tale, perhaps exaggerated, perhaps not. Another visitor, a blind storyteller, trades verses for warm bowls of jasmine-scented brew. And sometimes, a district inspector sits anonymously, listening not for entertainment but for murmured discontent. Each one a silent chronicle of the dynasty. The ritual of tea. The tea here is no grand banquet affair. It arrives in modest bowls. Dried leaves sourced from southern plantations in modern-day Sichuan are ground, boiled, and whisked into a foamy lather. No sugar, no honey, a bitterness that demands reflection. You observe the boy as he prepares a new pot. The water, drawn earlier from a well lined with pine charcoal, is heated in a bronze kettle suspended over embers. When it bubbles not too fiercely, he adds crushed leaves stored in a lacquered box. There are no scrolls of instruction here, no formal ceremony as one might find in the court. Yet everything is precise, practiced. In this rhythm of boiling, pouring, serving, time slows. Your mind drifts to recent news, a minor rebellion in the southwest, a tax increase on silk merchants, rumors of a new poet rising in Luoyang. Yet these are spoken softly here, not debated. The tea house is not for argument. It is for quiet processing. Ink and gossip. A young man in a faded scholar's robe enters, brushing dust from his sleeves. He carries a wooden writing case and a hunger not for food, but for silence. He takes his usual spot and opens his scrolls, pausing only to order a bowl of bitter green. He is studying for the civil service exam. Again. His third attempt. You've overheard his name in passing Sun Wei, or maybe Sun Wen. He rarely speaks unless spoken to, but once, months ago, you caught him reading a poem aloud under his breath. A sparrow darts across the imperial roof, and dreams it holds the jade seal in its claw. It lingered with you, the absurdity of that sparrow, the beauty of futile ambition. Around you, others scribble characters on scraps of reused paper. Some try their hand at poetry, others at memorizing tax codes or court rituals. Occasionally, someone breaks the rhythm, an old merchant with stories of Sogdian dances, or a peddler reciting a Confucian parable to a child who clearly wishes to be elsewhere. And then there are the silences. Long, purposeful, uninterrupted silences that seem to speak louder than the gossip. The walls that don't listen. The walls of the tea house are papered with faded paintings and brush-written calligraphy donated or forgotten by past patrons. One scroll near the entrance is signed by a man who later became magistrate of Longxi. Another contains a poorly drawn crane, ink bleeding into the paper, and a haiku. Clouds drift over soup, and no one knows I am here or was. No one ever replaces these scrolls. Their fading is part of the charm. This is not a tea house for greatness. It is a tea house for anonymity. And yet, perhaps that's what gives it power. As you sip your tea and glance at the patrons around you silent, absorbed, weary, you wonder. How many unknown scrolls, teacups, and forgotten conversations shape the course of this dynasty, more than any decree from the emperor himself? Outside the walls of the tea house, the bustle of Chang'an continues without pause. Couriers weave between rickshaws. Bell chimes signal prayers from nearby temples. The sharp call of hawkers pushing sesame cakes and lacquer brushes cuts through the air. But here, within the wooden structure tucked between brass vendors and scroll merchants, time seems suspended. You cradle your bowl of tea, letting the warmth seep into your palms as the quiet rituals of the space continue around you. It's not the tea that holds you here. It's the people, or rather, the lives that pass through quiet, complex, and almost always unnoticed. The young scholar, ambition meets routine. Sun Wen or Sun Wei, depending on who you ask, has returned. His entrance is always the same, head slightly bowed, steps deliberate. He carries a cloth bundle tied at the corners, worn from use. It contains a few bamboo brushes, a chipped ink stone, and a collection of reference scrolls. He does not order food, only tea, always tea, and he never drinks more than half. He settles at the table nearest the window, allowing just enough light to fall across his texts. With a slow, practiced rhythm, he prepares his ink. First the stone, moistened with a careful few drops of water. Then the grinding, circular and measured. No rush, no waste. He is preparing, again, for the imperial examinations. You've heard him mention it twice, both times reluctantly. In a city that values scholarship as the gateway to upward mobility, failure is not disgraceful, but repeated attempts begin to wear on one's self-regard. The civil service exams are brutal, designed to test more than memory. They require interpretation of Confucian texts, composition of formal documents, and poetic talent. There is no partial success. Pass or remain invisible. As Sun Wen begins writing, you catch a glimpse of his notes. Neatly organized references to the Zhuli, citations from the Book of Rites, and practice essays discussing filial piety and governance. You wonder, what if he never passes? What becomes of those who memorize the code of a government they'll never serve? A merchant's whisper. In the back of the room, a middle-aged man settles onto the floor cushion with a grunt. His robes are plain but of fine linen. He adjusts his belt, revealing a small scroll pouch, not one of a scholar but of a trader. He orders hawthorn tea and rice crackers and begins a conversation with the boy server, who he clearly knows. "How's your father's leg?" he asks. "Better," the boy replies. "The magistrate allowed him to return to warehouse work." The man nods, the silence stretches. He does not read. He does not write. Instead, he quietly shares tales with anyone willing to listen. You have heard them before. Ships from Annam delayed by storms. Arab merchants asking strange questions about court politics. Silk dye shortages due to mold on the mulberry leaves. The stories are always factual, always delivered in the same tired tone, not to impress, but to record. In his own way, this man has become a secondary courier of Tang Dynasty economics. To most, he is unremarkable, but you begin to wonder, how many of these quiet traders shaped international relations more than the court ever acknowledged? The scribe in the corner. At the far left, beneath a hanging scroll of mist-covered mountains, sits the elderly scribe. He always arrives before you and leaves after. His face is creased with lines that speak of concentration and restraint. He writes with a brush so fine it seems to dance. He does not look up, even when others greet him. His work is not personal. He is copying a sutra for the White Horse Temple, the entire Heart Sutra, line by line, again and again. This is not for religious merit, though that may be part of it. Rather, this is a paid commission, a way to earn food and lodging. The scribe writes with slow elegance, pausing between lines to stretch his fingers. His ink is light, his characters deliberate, no room for flair, only clarity. And you realize, copying the same sacred words every day for years is not spiritual ecstasy, it's a job. It is quiet labor, sacred only because it demands such perfect boredom. Eavesdropping and small power. The woman who sometimes sits with the scholar has returned today. She is not dressed for court service, but the way she holds her posture, the clipped elegance of her tones, they mark her as someone who has worked close to power. She says little, except to occasionally mutter corrections when the boy makes errors while reciting poetry. Today, she is listening in silence to two young bureaucrats, seated near the middle pillar. They speak quietly but audibly, complaints about a local magistrate accused of withholding grain shipments. It is nothing scandalous, not yet, but she leans closer just slightly under the pretense of adjusting her shawl. You recall rumors that she once served as a copyist in the Ministry of Revenue, or perhaps it was the Ministry of Punishments. No one is sure, but her presence suggests she still knows people who listen to what others overhear. In the Tang court, gossip can change careers, but here in the tea house, it's exchanged like coins, small, worn, circulated endlessly. Tea as a medium of memory. The boy brings your second bowl of tea. This one is darker, with a hint of dried chrysanthemum. You thank him quietly. He doesn't respond, only bows and returns to the back to resume cleaning cups. As the steam rises, you think about what this place really is. A tea house, yes, but more than that, a reservoir of the empire's forgotten thoughts. It does not record battles. It does not hear decrees. It only holds the residual murmurings of people who will never be remembered, the bureaucrats whose names never reached the scrolls, the scholars who failed the exam, the monks who copied instead of preached, the merchants who died nameless in dusty ledgers. They came, they sat, they sipped, and somewhere between the boiling of water and the quiet scraping of inkstones, they left traces behind. The tea house absorbs them. It is a passive witness. Its walls hold no records, but they have memory silent without pride. You finish your bowl slowly. Across the room, Sun Wen frowns at a passage and scribbles something out. The merchant glances at the door, considering another story. The woman with the sharp eyes leans closer again. And you can't help but think, if these people were never remembered, is it only the tea house that remembers them now? The light filtering through the reed screens begins to shift, a golden, slanted softness that signals the approach of late afternoon. The hum of the city outside has not faded, but it seems more distant now, as if the tea house itself is sinking deeper into its own hush. You remain in your seat, tea cooled, bowl empty, and yet you feel no need to move. Not yet. Around you, the same scene continues to unfold. The ink is still being ground. The brushes still dance in silence. The same lives continue to play out, not with drama or urgency, but in repetition, slow, steady, and unseen. And yet, what seems ordinary is anything but. The more you watch, the more it becomes clear. This tea house is not simply a resting place for weary minds. It is a node in the living body of the Tang Dynasty, a small, vital nerve that pulses with unseen influence. Threads beneath the surface. The scholar's son, when is gone. At some point, perhaps during your contemplation, he quietly gathered his things and left. No farewell, no declaration. His unfinished tea remains, a green half circle at the bottom of the cup, trembling faintly with the passing footsteps outside. Did he go to study more, to seek out a tutor, or perhaps, in a moment of quiet resignation, he turned toward the outer districts to seek work unrelated to his dream? You remember the poem he once whispered. Ink drips like rain on scrolls that no one reads. It lingers now like a ghost of his ambition, not quite sad, but distant, as if part of a ritual far older than him. The ritual of trying, failing, and trying again. The return of an official. Unusually, someone new has entered. His robe is neat, dyed a deep indigo with gold edging. His posture betrays his training. He is of the bureaucracy, mid-level at least, possibly from the Ministry of Justice, judging by the plum-colored seal pouch at his waist. The room shifts subtly as he arrives. Not fear, but recognition. He is not from here. He is visiting. He orders tea camellia blossom, a choice that suggests he is not interested in lingering. He opens a scroll and pretends to read, but his eyes dart toward the woman in the corner, the merchant, the scribe. He is listening more than observing. And then, as if by accident, he engages the merchant in quiet conversation. Something about tax exemptions for traders from the southern ports. It's couched in the language of rumor, but the intention is clear. He is gathering minor intelligence, perhaps for a report, perhaps for leverage. In this tea house, you learn quickly. Not all teacups are innocent. Some are bribes, some are feelers, and some are inquiries wrapped in friendliness. This is the invisible theater of statecraft. No court, no banners, no swords, just words, hushed, measured. And it begs the question, how many dynastic decisions began not in the palace, but over half-drunk bowls of tea like these? The scribe's quiet completion. The elderly scribe shifts his weight, sighs deeply, and gently places his brush down. His scroll is finished. Every character of the Heart Sutra perfectly copied. You notice the care with which he handles the parchment, folding it as if tucking in a child. He wraps it in cloth, binding it with silk thread, and bows briefly toward the altar-less wall across from him. A moment of reverence. And then he reaches for a new scroll, another copy. The cycle begins again. There is no celebration, no recognition, only the work. And that is the story of so many civil workers, scribes, accountants, archivists. Their tasks are not remembered because they are not exceptional. But the continuity of a dynasty depends on the unexceptional being performed without fail. That truth is as beautiful as it is invisible. Evening shadows. The boy begins to light the oil lamps. Their glow is soft, hesitant at first, casting long shadows along the scroll-covered walls. The tea house transitions into evening not with a signal but with a collective exhale. The volume of voices lowers further. The cups are washed more slowly. A new patron enters, a woman in her 50s, hair coiled in a bun, robes ink-stained. She may be a teacher or a copyist. She greets no one, but her presence is familiar. The regulars recognize each other, not through speech, but through pattern. The frequency of visits, the type of tea, the direction of their gaze. This is a space of silent recognition, social but unspeaking. You consider the walls again, the faded scrolls, the old haiku, the painting of a mountain that has lost its shape from water damage. These walls have heard centuries of trivial thoughts, yet they are lined with the shadows of people who kept the state running not by edict, but by ink, not by revolution, but by repetition. The Tang Empire will one day fall, Chang'an will burn, but for now, in this forgotten corner, it is held together by the quietest of hands. A final reflection. You stand to leave. No one acknowledges your movement. This is expected. The tea house is not a place of arrivals or departures. It simply is. As you cross the threshold and step once again into the din of Chang'an streets, the sun has dipped low behind the tiled roofs. The shadows are long. The scent of spice and charcoal fills the air. But your mind remains with the scribe, the merchant, the scholar, and the ink-stained woman. They are not recorded in the official histories. No epics will be written about them. And yet, as you reflect on the empire's greatness, its bureaucracy, its poetry, its laws, you cannot help but think. Perhaps the strength of an empire was never in its generals or emperors, but in the unnoticed hands that boiled water, dipped brushes, and copied the same sacred lines over and over again. You are standing by the side of a road, not a dirt track or footpath, but a meticulously engineered strip of stone and gravel, stretching like a gray ribbon toward the horizon. This is the Via Flaminia, and it is morning in the year 14 CE, near the town of Narnia, modern-day Narni, north of Rome. The sun is still low, casting long shadows from the pine trees lining the roadside. A breeze carries the scent of iron tools, oil, and sweat. Birds sing. Somewhere nearby, a donkey brays, impatient for its load to be lifted. You are not a traveler on this road. You are here to observe the men who built it and who continue to maintain it. These are not soldiers or senators. These are the laborers, surveyors, overseers, and administrators of a vast imperial infrastructure. The road may look eternal, but it is held together by mud, lime, taxes, and men whose names history does not bother to record. A Roman road is never finished. Though the Via Flaminia was first laid in 220 BCE under the orders of Gaius Flaminius, the work of building and maintaining Roman roads is never done. This is not a monument. It is a living artery. And today, you find a crew working to repair a section damaged by spring floods. Perhaps 20 men, dressed in tunics stained with red dust, hammer, lift, and smooth stone with an unhurried efficiency. They are mostly slaves and freedmen, leased out by contractors, supervised by a Menser A government surveyor. Their tools are simple but effective: picks, spades, chisels, plumb lines, and long rods marked with measurement units. Most have calloused hands and sun-leathered skin. One wears a patch over an eye, likely lost to flying stone. Another limps, perhaps from lifting one too many paving slabs. The road is layered with care. First, a bed of large stone statumen. Above that, crushed gravel and lime rudis and nucleus. Then comes the final paving layer, polygonal stones placed tightly together, their edges shaved down to prevent water from pooling. Nothing is wasted. Damaged stones are reshaped, reused. Cracks are filled with powdered marble and sand. No one speaks unless necessary. The rhythm of hammering, scraping, and setting is almost meditative. And as you watch, you realize, this road is not a symbol of power. It is power expressed through organization, taxation, and relentless labor. Who builds the empire? The Menser, a man named Lardius, oversees the work. He carries a leather case filled with scrolls, blueprints, property maps, and ledgers listing labor contracts and tool allocations. Lardius is not a high-ranking official, but he is essential. Without him, no road would stay straight. His tools are geometry and patience. He explains in his dry way how the empire manages these roadworks. The Senate or local magistrates authorize funding. Tax revenue is allocated through a complicated mix of imperial decree and local negotiation. Contractors bid for maintenance work, providing both tools and labor. The workers themselves, mostly non-citizens, paid a pittance or not at all. Every length of road has a name, a length, and a log. Everything is measured, noted, reported. Lardius is proud of his records. He tells you that Julius Caesar once ordered a full survey of the roads around Rome. Even emperors need straight lines, he says, without smiling. You ask him if he's ever met a senator. He shakes his head. I meet stones and men who lift them. Taxation by the mile. Each stone on this road is financed by taxation, not just Roman taxes, but taxes gathered in the provinces. From wheat levies in Egypt to tolls collected in Gaul, the money moves inward to the center and then outward to projects like this. But it is not just taxes that fund roads. Sometimes landowners are required to contribute labor directly. Farmers from nearby villages are rotated into road crews for weeks at a time, leaving their fields to be maintained by wives, children, or no one. One such farmer, a wiry man named Faustus, is here today. He is from a village 3 miles away. His payment, a reduction in land tax if the overseer signs off. He does not complain, not openly. But as he bends to lift a paving stone with 2 others, his breath comes hard, and he mutters something about his wife being alone with 3 children during harvest. You are struck by this arrangement. A vast empire whose prestige is built not by heroism, but by coerced labor, precise accounting, and unending bureaucracy. It is not glorious, but it works. A day's labor. The workday is not marked by a clock, but by the sun and the overseer's bark. At midday the crew stops. Bread is passed around, olives, dried figs, a flask of vinegar water shared between 3 men. They sit on the road edge, legs dangling over the ditch, too tired to speak. A few joke in a mix of Latin and regional dialects, Oscan, Umbrian, or something older still. One man begins to carve a small face into a broken paving stone, a tiny act of resistance, or perhaps just boredom. It will be gone by tomorrow, flattened under a cart's wheel. There is no celebration of the road's beauty, no talk of Rome's greatness. The road is simply a job, one that will never end. For every mile repaired, another mile elsewhere is crumbling. Even the cursus publicus, Rome's official courier system, rides these roads with caution. The heavy wagons wear the surface down, and every governor wants his section perfect before inspection. You begin to realize these roads are a system of quiet panic, always on the verge of decay, maintained only through constant vigilance. A forgotten masterpiece. In the distance, a column stands, a miliarium, or mile marker carved decades ago. The inscription is nearly gone, weathered smooth by wind and rain. It once bore the name of Augustus, now it is just stone. And so you reflect. Who built this road? Not Augustus, not Flaminius, not Caesar, but Faustus and the one-eyed slave and the scribe Lardius with his scroll case, men whose names are already forgotten. And yet you are standing here, centuries later, on a path they laid by hand. Doesn't that count for something? By late afternoon, the road gleams faintly under the weight of passing carts. Iron-rimmed wheels have already begun to press new wear patterns into the freshly repaired section. The workers step aside to allow a cursus publicus courier through, a slim man astride a tired horse, his leather satchel bulging with scrolls sealed in wax. He doesn't slow. He knows the road crew will make way. The road is not for them. It's for Rome, for messages, for grain, for legions. But to understand this road is not only to understand its stones. It is to understand the network of bureaucracy, obligation, and transaction that sustains it, an empire not built on marble statues, but on columns of numbers inked by candlelight. A clerk in a roadside shed. Just off the side of the road, behind a thicket of olives and scrub pine, stands a wooden lintel with a tiled roof, blackened by soot. This is not a home. It's a field office, operated by a road inspection clerk. Inside, the air is close and smells of wax, sweat, and mildew. The clerk's name is Clodius Metellus, though he assures you with a self-deprecating smirk that no one remembers the Metellus name anymore. His tunic is ink-stained, and his eyes are red from squinting over scrolls. He's been stationed here for 4 years, part of a rotation managed by the Praefectus Vehiculorum, the imperial office that oversees transportation. His tools are simple: a reed pen and inkpot, sheets of parchment, and a few rare pieces of papyrus, a wax tablet for rough calculations, a heavy ledger tracking miles of road, worker attendance, and supply costs. Every evening he tallies labor hours. He knows how many paving stones are chipped, how many are missing, and how many were delivered late by subcontractors. His handwriting is neat, standardized, the kind demanded by imperial auditors. He shows you a logbook. 5th day before the kalends of September 17, paving stones replaced, 5 borrowed from Narnia Depot, 3 slaves from Lucius Septimus's estate returned late, 1 cart axle broke, rain delay expected tomorrow. It reads like dullness carved into parchment, but it is this dullness that keeps the empire moving. Bureaucracy as infrastructure. You ask Clodius if he ever visits Rome. He snorts. Only in writing. I send reports there. I imagine someone reads them. Clodius is the middle of a long chain. Above him are traveling inspectors, then provincial engineers, curators viarum, and above them, senators with honorary appointments who may never see the roads they supposedly manage. Below Clodius are contractors, day laborers, and slaves, many leased from wealthy landowners at fixed rates. Some are rotated through the munera, the public service obligations that provinces owe to the empire in lieu of taxes. In fact, as Clodius explains, some stretches of road maintenance are not funded at all, they are just assigned, like chores. Whole villages are told, maintain this 5 miles or face tax penalties. And so a road is not simply paid for, it is extracted from villages, slaves, freedmen, and overseers like Clodius, who writes reports no one thanks him for. You begin to grasp something uncomfortable. Rome did not merely tax its people. It organized their lives around debt to the state, and the roads were both the tool and the metaphor for that organization. Corruption in the cobblestones. Clodius gestures toward the road with a sigh. See that stone, poor quality, it will crack by winter. He suspects the local contractor, a man named Decimus, has been skimming funds, delivering subpar limestone instead of volcanic basalt. But what can be done? Complaints take months to process, and Decimus likely bribes his inspectors. Corruption in Rome is not hidden. It is a feature of the system, tolerated, even expected, provided the roads still function. You hear rumors. Workers listed on rosters, but never present. Stone shipments claimed, but never delivered. Freedmen bribing overseers for lighter duties. Contractors pressuring scribes to falsify ledgers. And yet the system limps along. The empire endures, not because of perfection, but because everyone cheats just enough to survive but not enough to collapse the structure. The engineers and the ghosts of Greece. Later in the day, a small group of men arrive bearing measuring rods and surveying instruments. These are engineers, educated men from the eastern provinces, trained in Alexandria or Antioch. They speak Greek among themselves, taking careful measurements and discussing soil erosion. You overhear them talking about Archimedes, about water drainage channels, about a new method for laying curved paving stones more evenly. They are the minority thinkers among laborers. They are not praised. They are merely expected to ensure the road does not fail. One of them, a thin man named Heracles, shows you a tablet covered in diagrams, not of statues or temples, but of retaining walls, water flow, and incline angles. He explains that even a small gradient miscalculation can ruin an entire section of road. It is technical, tedious, but it is essential. Without these drawings, the empire falls apart not in war but in the mud. The men who sleep beside the road. That night, as stars begin to pepper the sky, the workers huddle around a low fire near the shed. They roast onions and dried meat, chewing slowly. No songs, no prayers. Just warmth and silence. They sleep on straw mats or on the ground, using cloaks for blankets. You see the outlines of scars, calluses, and injuries. One man, a teenager, stares upward with his hands behind his head. He says nothing. He will do this work until he is too injured to continue, and then he will be discarded, unless a landowner finds some other use for him. None of them will be memorialized, no statues, no names in stone. But every step a Roman citizen takes, every message an official sends, every victory a general claims rests on the backs of these invisible men. An open ledger. Clodius closes his ledger before turning in for the night. Tomorrow he will reopen it, measure progress, adjust wages, and send a report down the chain. He tells you he once dreamed of becoming a lawyer. He liked writing. He liked numbers. But roads are what Rome needed. So here he is, counting stones instead of cases. He smiles tiredly. I keep the empire level. Someone has to. And you realize, it's not emperors who maintain empires, it's people like Clodius, who balance ledgers so the wheels don't stick. But what happens when the wheels slow anyway? What happens when the taxes dry up, the villages can no longer give, and the roads begin to crumble from both ends? The next morning begins with the sound of chisels tapping softly against stone. A mist clings to the roadside trees, and dew glistens on the freshly packed gravel. The men are already at work not because they love it, but because stopping means penalties, rations withheld, and notices sent back to towns where families depend on uncertain exemptions. You walk the road alone for a while, following the gentle incline toward a crossing bridge. A segment completed some 30 years ago, where the older stones show more wear. As the mist lifts, you begin to see the broader shape of what the empire built, not just roads but systems. Quiet ones, stable, but only while every cog turned. Now, as the empire crests its zenith in the early 1st century CE, some of those cogs are already straining. A road without end. The Via Flaminia does not end here. It stretches nearly 200 miles from Rome to Ariminum, modern-day Rimini, cutting through mountains, valleys, and aqueduct crossings. It has been expanded, repaired, and sometimes rerouted for over 2 centuries. The road scale is impressive, yes, but that's not the most remarkable part. What matters more is that this stone strip connects everything: military outposts, postal relay stations, grain depots, tax offices, and temples. A letter sent from Rome today could be in Ariminum in just 4 days if conditions are good. A general's orders, a census report, a tax summons. But there's a catch. If the road fails, the message fails. If the road fails, the tax fails. If the road fails, the empire does too. And so, the empire must endlessly feed the road with coin, with labor, with ledgers, with oversight. It is a hungry system. What the road costs. As you return toward the worksite, you pass a mule-drawn cart laden with paving stones. The driver mutters curses under his breath. He is behind schedule, and the fine for late delivery could mean the loss of an entire month's earnings. The cost of maintaining the road is not just gold. It's time stolen from harvests, injuries suffered in silence, local resentments quietly brewing. In villages you pass, you hear whispers. Why must we repair Rome's road when our own aqueduct leaks? Why does the tax collector care more about mileage logs than starving children? Why must we serve a state that sends us no help, only instructions? It is still manageable, this grumbling, but you can feel it, the early, hairline cracks in the marble facade of Roman efficiency. Not collapse, not yet. But strain. A contractor's ledgers and lies. You meet Decimus, the contractor Clodius suspected of fraud. He's a broad man with clean hands and an oily smile. He shows you his records: inflated figures, manipulated delivery notes, vague entries like misc. Stone, 4 cartloads. He is not subtle, but he doesn't need to be. His cousin serves in a provincial magistrate's office. His workers are replaceable, and as long as the road remains passable, the complaints won't reach high enough to cause trouble. The Empire wants roads, not perfection, he tells you. I give them roads. What does it matter if a few stones crumble? It matters to Faustus, the peasant still hammering the road miles back. It matters to Clodius, who must balance books that never align. It matters to the couriers whose horses stumble on uneven slabs. And perhaps one day it will matter to the Empire. The road as memory. That evening, Faustus, the village farmer turned road worker, finishes his shift. His back aches. He is given a small token of exemption to show the tax clerk in his town. He'll receive no money, only the hope of one less levy next month. As he prepares to leave, he drops a small stone into the ditch. On it, scratched in poor Latin, is the phrase, Ego viam stravi. I pave the road. No one sees him do it. No one thanks him. But it stays there, hidden under soil and gravel, an unacknowledged marker of labor. And it makes you wonder, how many lives disappeared beneath these roads, not in death, but in unrecognized contribution. The road as legacy. Centuries from now, long after the Western Empire falls, these roads will remain, weakened, repaired by local rulers, repurposed, but still walkable, still visible. Some will marvel at the engineering. Others will write of imperial ambition or the spread of Roman culture. Few will pause to consider the ledgers, the farm hands, the accountants, the contracts, and the slow, grinding labor that made it possible. Fewer still will imagine the dust-covered clerk calculating work hours by lantern light, or the barefoot teenager hauling stones for bread. And yet, they were the ones who truly held the empire together. The final stretch. As you walk away from the site, the road continues ahead of you, silent, cracked in places but still usable. And you're left with this thought. When the empire ends not in flames, but in silence, will it be the forgotten laborers who outlast the emperors? Will their stones tell a story that no monument ever could? The city of Babylon, around 530 BCE, is not quite what it once was, and yet it remains one of the greatest urban centers the world has ever seen. Under the rule of King Nabonidus, and later the Persian conqueror Cyrus the Great, the city hums with the careful rhythm of commerce, record-keeping, and ritual. The ziggurats still stand, the processional way still gleams, and deep within the administrative quarters of the city, tucked behind storerooms and reed-lined courtyards, sits a man at a low desk. Not a priest, not a merchant, not a warrior. A scribe. His name is Ilutabni, and he will never be famous. He will never lead an army or build a palace. But in his small clay tablets, marked with precise cuneiform lines, he holds the city's memory and ensures its machinery continues. He is a bean counter in the most literal sense, and this is his story. The world of clay. You step through the low doorway of the records room, its interior lit by morning sunlight filtered through a latticed window. On one side of the room there are rows of clay tablets, neatly stacked by category and date. Taxes, grain storage, temple donations, trade receipts, livestock counts. On the other side sits Ilutabni, cross-legged, hunched over a wooden board. He is preparing today's accounting, quantities of chickpeas and lentils received from a farmer named Zaraquim, destined for the kitchens of the Temple of Marduk. The figures must be exact. Miscounted grain leads to disputes, shortages, or worse, accusations of embezzlement. His tools are few but essential. A stylus made from a sharpened reed. Wet clay tablets of varying sizes. a damp cloth for smoothing mistakes, a tally rope hanging on the wall marked with knots for previous calculations. He works in silence, lips moving as he counts, divides, estimates. There are no calculators here, only muscle memory, mental arithmetic, and the patience to recopy tablets when the clay cracks. Not just a scribe. Ilutabni is not a servant. He is trained. He has memorized lists of Sumerian signs, mastered Akkadian grammar, and passed assessments overseen by temple officials. His education began when he was barely old enough to walk, seated in the tablet house, or edubba, where boys are whipped for sloppy lines and praised for symmetrical characters. He writes not for art, but for clarity. And his readers are not kings or poets, they are grain supervisors, tax collectors, and warehouse guards. A single error in measurement, mistaking a gur for a ka, could mean an entire shipment vanishes from the ledger. This is the invisible architecture of Babylon's economy. Measurements, not monuments. Counting beans and barley and goats. Today, Ilutabni records the arrival of 13 sela of sesame oil, 50 ka of chickpeas, 120 ka of lentils, 4 live goats earmarked for ritual slaughter, 1 broken amphora of beer, noted for temple reimbursement. He notes the names of all deliverers, their villages, the date in the king's regnal calendar, and finally his own seal, a small imprint of a lion-headed figure, pressed with a cylinder seal passed down from his grandfather. He knows none of this is glamorous, but he also knows, without these numbers the city would stop. Temples would lack food, markets would misprice goods, taxes would go uncollected, soldiers would go unpaid. His job is not to be important. It is to ensure that those who think they are important can continue acting that way. The clay archive. Once dried, each tablet is placed in a labeled basket. Some are eventually stored in a long room, the archive, where years of records are kept on crude wooden shelves. Some of these tablets are over 50 years old, still legible. Ilutabni once copied one for training, a contract involving a herd of sheep, a disagreement over pasture rights, and an arbitration ruling by a priest. He laughed at the childish handwriting, then realized it may have been his father's. The records are kept not for nostalgia but for legal proof. If a merchant claims a shipment was never received, a clerk must find the original receipt. If a farmer argues his grain tax is too high, a review of previous years' harvests might determine the truth. In this sense, Ilutabni is not just a clerk, he is Babylon's memory. A life of boredom and precision. His daily schedule is repetitive. Morning, update ledgers, accept shipments, confirm weights. Midday, check tallies against temple inventories. Afternoon, draft contracts, witness oaths, and record transactions. Evening, smooth new tablets for tomorrow, sharpen stylus, wipe sweat from his brow. Occasionally, someone will offer him a tip, a handful of dates, or a scoop of sweet beer. More often, he is ignored. He is not a merchant, not a noble, he is the background. And yet, his hands shape the very records that kings depend on to rule. When Cyrus eventually marches into Babylon and takes control without bloodshed, it will be because his scribes understand what Babylon's scribes already built. A system where control is measured in grain receipts, not sword strokes. An unanswered question. That night, Ilutabni smooths one last clay tablet, preparing it for use in the morning. His fingers ache, his eyes sting. He pauses and looks at his shelves, hundreds of tablets, full of numbers, names, and trades. None mention him, except with a seal. He wonders, will anyone remember the scribe who counted the beans? Or will they remember only the kings whose banquets they fed? The sun rises slowly over the wide boulevards and ziggurats of Babylon, casting long golden shadows on baked mud brick walls. The air is thick with the scent of morning fires, oil, bread, burning reeds, and the low murmur of commerce beginning. Ilutabni is already awake, already seated behind his low desk within the storage annex of the Temple of Marduk. His stylus is damp, ready. The first shipment of the day dried dates from a village 10 miles down the Euphrates has arrived. With it comes a new set of problems: weights that don't match, baskets without seals, complaints of flooding that destroyed part of the harvest. The scribe does not groan. He simply dips his stylus again and begins to write. He is used to this. His work is never dramatic, but like the flow of the Euphrates itself, it is relentless. More than beans, the complexity of temple accounting. The temple is not just a house of prayer. In Babylon, it is a hub of administration, landholding, ritual, and commerce. And Ilutabni's clay tablets touch each corner of that network. Today's ledgers reflect the complexity of his job. 5 shekels of silver were paid by a merchant to lease temple storage space. A delivery of barley for the sacred meal of the next full moon was found to be damp, recorded, and rejected. 3 scribes under Ilutabni are being trained to copy trade agreements with Elamite vendors. A debt repayment from a family is recorded. 1 goat and 2 baskets of onions, accepted as partial settlement from a 5-year-old contract. It would be easier, perhaps, to assume that temple scribes were like priests, insulated and slow. But Ilutabni knows the truth. The temple's memory keeps the city running. Every ritual is accounted for, every loan tracked, every brick tallied. There is no mystery, only math. The politics of measurement. It is not enough to write numbers. Ilutabni must negotiate them. A man named Beletaru, a mid-ranking administrator with wine on his breath, arrives just after noon with 2 complaints. The goats allocated for the month's sacrifices are underweight. A new laborer listed on the temple rolls is receiving more rations than his peers. Ilutabni checks the tablets. He measures the goats personally. Then he finds the laborer's original listing and discovers the source of the discrepancy: a single numeral miswritten by an apprentice scribe. He smooths the tablet, rewrites the entry, applies his seal again. Error corrected. Beletaru says nothing, but he now knows Ilutabni's authority extends beyond numbers. It extends into credibility. 1 miscounted goat could suggest corruption. 1 excess ration could become an accusation. And accusations are currency in palace politics. In this way, scribes are not powerless. Their strength lies in silence, in exactitude, in making the system appear seamless even when it is. A scribe's apprentices. In a side chamber, Ilutabni oversees the afternoon lessons of his 3 apprentices. They are all boys, 1 the son of a priest, 1 from a poor fishing family, and 1, orphaned, taken in by the temple. He dictates aloud a simple contract. In the 10th year of Nabonidus, on the 4th day of the month Tammuz, Luninurta borrows 2 donkeys from Zaraquim for 10 days. Payment: 1 mina of barley, witnessed by Ishtar-Uballit. The boys copy it carefully. The letters are crooked. 1 confuses the sign for day with that for 10. Another makes a mark too deeply, cracking the clay. Ilutabni is patient. He shows them again. He knows they are not just learning how to write. They are learning how to make the invisible visible, how to turn fleeting exchanges into durable memory. One day, they will do what he does, and if they are careful, their work too will last centuries. Not in fame, but in the survival of records. Enemies of the ledger. Not everyone appreciates the scribe's work. That evening, a visiting trader complains that a debt recorded 3 years ago, when he had hoped forgotten, has been found and reasserted. What good is memory if it only serves to enslave us? He grumbles. Ilutabni does not answer. He simply holds up the tablet. It is there in clay, witnessed, sealed. In a world where spoken promises disappear, the scribe holds the truth that sticks. But he wonders quietly if there is truth to the merchant's frustration. The record preserves fairness, but it also enforces hierarchies, locks people into systems they cannot challenge. Is Ilutabni a servant of order or a tool of oppression? He doesn't know, he just counts. A ritual and a realization. Later that night, a festival procession passes by. Priests in white robes carry torches. Women scatter flower petals. Horns and drums echo off the temple walls. It is Marduk's night, a time of renewal. Ilutabni does not participate. He watches from the doorway of the archives, where hundreds of dried tablets rest like slumbering bricks. Each tablet is a record of something small. 10 dates, a rented cart, a lost sheep, a returned amphora. None of it seems sacred. And yet, without these records, the priests could not plan rituals. The temple could not prepare offerings. The workers could not eat. The city would not know what it owed or to whom. He realizes, perhaps the gods are fed by sacrifice, but the city is fed by scribes. And in that there is meaning. An unresolved line. Ilutabni smooths a new tablet, begins a line. In the 11th year of Nabonidus, during the month of Ab, the scribe Ilutabni. But he stops, pauses. He does not know what will follow. Will it be a receipt, a contract, a complaint? Or something else, a notice of conquest, a change in rulers, a rewriting of records? Because rumor has it, Cyrus, the Persian king, is approaching. And if he arrives, what happens to the ledgers? What happens to the scribes? It is the first morning of the 11th year of King Nabonidus, but something is different. The air is still dry, the temple walls still shaded with soot from the oil lamps, and the tablet house still smells of clay and ink and human exhaustion. But beneath the surface, the usual rhythms are uneven. Whispers travel faster than orders. The rumors that Ilutabni once dismissed about a Persian army under Cyrus now arrive not in fragments, but in names, in movements, in urgent revisions of old lists. The scribes are not panicked, but they are listening. A scribe's duty during transition. This morning, Ilutabni is asked to do something unusual. He is summoned to the temple's upper chamber, where a senior priest named Nabuarib is preparing an inventory of temple assets, but not for ritual. For transfer. There is no proclamation yet, no victory parade, but it is clear that Babylon's ruling class expects a shift, and they want to protect their institutions. Ilutabni, who has spent decades writing measurements of barley and garlic and goat weight, is now asked to compile something new. An index of cattle and grain holdings, a summary of temple donations owed and collected, a list of scribe names and contracts currently open. He writes quickly, silently, with no comment, but inside his thoughts begin to churn. What becomes of a scribe when the government changes, but the grain still needs to be counted? The Persian entry. Within days the event occurs, not with blood, not with siege, but with footsteps. The Persian army under Cyrus enters Babylon peacefully. The gates open. The soldiers do not burn. They do not loot. In fact, they come with scribes of their own carrying reed pens and speaking Old Persian, Elamite, and Aramaic. For most citizens, life continues. But for Ilutabni, the language of his clay tablets no longer matches the language of rule. His ledgers are not discarded, not yet. But new scrolls appear, papyrus and parchment, imported from the West. The Persians prefer writing sideways, not in columns, and they use ink, not impressions. Still, the temple continues. People still owe taxes. Rituals still require food. The scribes are still needed. But now their audience has changed. Translation and adaptation. Soon, a man named Artavardia, a Persian administrator, begins visiting the archive room. He does not read cuneiform well, but he brings a translator, a young Babylonian scribe eager to please. Artavardia is not cruel, he is pragmatic. We will keep the grain flowing, he tells Ilutabni. But we must understand how it moves. Ilutabni teaches him the symbols for gore, ka, sila the volume measures. He draws diagrams of how goods flow from village to temple to market. He explains how to read a seal, how to detect a forgery, how to calculate days based on the moon. He does this because the records must live, no matter who holds the throne. For the first time in decades, he is not merely copying, he is interpreting. An ending of one kind. One afternoon, the priest Nabuarib hands Ilutabni a small, sealed envelope of silver shekels. "Your retirement," he says. "The Persians are bringing in their own scribes soon. They will keep some of ours. You may rest." Ilutabni nods. He feels neither pride nor regret, only stillness. He returns to the records room and looks upon the stacks of clay tablets, some cracked, some still damp, many with his seal pressed into their corner. Together, they contain the memory of 30 years of Babylonian economy. Contracts, debts, repayments, inventories. Each one represents a truth once lived, a goat weighed, a shipment delayed, a field measured, a promise sealed. And he wonders, will the new scribes read them? Will they understand the decisions made in barley weight and amphora leaks? Or will they build new ledgers and let the old ones harden into silence? A final tablet. That evening, Ilutabni does something he has never done. He prepares a clay tablet for himself. In the 11th year of Nabonidus, after the entry of Cyrus the king, I, Ilutabni, scribe of the house of Marduk, retire from the temple's service. My seal is no longer required. My clay is dry. May the gods of writing, of ink and tablet, record that I was here. He seals it, he does not file it. He tucks it into a small clay pot, buries it beneath the floor of the records room. No one will read it for millennia, if ever. But it is there. Memory without fame. Ilutabni is not remembered in stories. No statue bears his name, but the tablets he wrote will survive floods, fire, invasion, and decay. Centuries later, when the clay is dug up by archaeologists and the script slowly translated, his ledgers will tell a truth even he did not expect: that the survival of civilization is often carried not by kings or generals, but by scribes who count beans. The year is 1722, the final months of Emperor Kangxi's reign. The Qing Empire, stretched across rivers, mountains, and desert, remains stable, at least on paper. Grain moves, couriers run, taxes flow. But in the region known as Lianghui, where the Yangtze River meets the Grand Canal, there exists a substance more tightly controlled than silver, and more vital than tea or porcelain. Salt. It is not mined here, it is distributed, and that distribution powers the regional economy, funds the bureaucracy, and lines the pockets of merchants and officials alike. You stand on the dock of Yangzhou, a thriving commercial hub and the epicenter of salt ticket administration. Ships from Sichuan and Fujian line the harbor. Barrels of preserved fish, baskets of dried fruit, and crates of lacquerware clutter the shoreline. But you are not here to trade. You are here to observe a clerk, buried inside a government hall where the real currency is documentation. The salt clerk. His name is Liu Wengsu, and his title is unremarkable: Zhashi, a scribe within the Lianghui Salt Distribution Commission. He wears no bright robes or gilded badges. His desk is stacked with bamboo-bound ledgers, ink brushes, and slips of printed paper. Salt tickets. These tickets are not just receipts, they are monopoly licenses. A single slip of paper may represent access to thousands of gin of salt. Each is numbered, recorded, and when transferred, updated in ledgers. Salt is taxed, salt is rationed, salt is never free. And it is Liu's job to track every ounce of it. Salt tickets, paper that commands empires. A trader enters the office. His head is bowed, his hands present a folded packet of salt tickets. Liu accepts it, unwraps the paper carefully, and inspects the stamp. The red seal must be exact. Any smudge or duplication suggests forgery. 42 Dan, Liu mutters. Northeast route, second quarter. He opens the register, thick, yellowed pages filled with looping script. He checks the trader's name, his family license number, and the transport corridor he's assigned to. Then, he writes a new line. Transferred. 42 Dan from merchant Shen Yuan. Ticket number 38142A, routed to Wuhu Depot. The ticket is restamped. The man bows again. No words are exchanged about price, bribes, or favors, but you sense that each gesture carries a long tradition of quiet expectations. For Liu, it's all in the details. One wrong number, one missing character, and the entire chain of salt allocation could collapse into accusations. The bureaucratic machine. The Lianghui Salt Administration is not a single office. It is a network, stretching from imperial ministries in Beijing to depot inspectors along the Grand Canal. Salt wells and pans are far south, in Sichuan and Yunnan. Salt is transported by official barges, manned by contract laborers. Merchants bid for rights to move and sell salt. Officials like Liu maintain meticulous logs, cross-referenced monthly. Tax collectors skim from both ends, officially through levies, unofficially through informal gifts. And every interaction leaves a paper trail, one that Liu and his colleagues must reconcile with physical deliveries that often arrive late, short, or not at all. Sometimes entire shipments vanish, bribes disappear with them. And yet the ledgers must balance. Corruption and compliance. You ask Liu if he ever suspects fraud. He pauses. I don't write what I suspect, I write what I can verify. This, you realize, is the delicate art of bureaucratic survival, maintaining the illusion of control, even when the truth slips through the cracks. If an official pushes too hard, he might lose influence or worse, become a target. If he is too lax, his department becomes vulnerable to audit. So Liu walks a careful line. He flags suspicious entries, but rarely reports them. He requests reweighing of certain shipments, but never accuses. He rewrites problematic lines when errors are discovered, but keeps copies. In his private journal, kept wrapped in cloth under his bed mat, he records everything: names, dates, altered ledgers. He doesn't do this for revenge. He does it in case he ever needs leverage. The power of the pencil. Though he holds no title of prestige, Liu understands his role in the great engine of Qing administration. He tells you. The merchant moves the salt, the barge rows it. But the pencil tells the emperor it arrived. Without my marks, the salt never existed. He's not wrong. Tax quotas, regional budgets, and even food allotments for soldiers are based on these records. An emperor may rule from afar, but his power flows through pens like Liu's. It's a strange kind of power, quiet, replaceable, easily overlooked but utterly essential. A whisper in the hall. That evening, as oil lamps flicker and the last tickets are sealed away, Liu overhears a conversation between two junior clerks. They speak in hushed tones about an investigation into the Wuhu Depot misreported salt levels, stolen shipments, a bribe uncovered. Liu says nothing, but he knows if an audit follows, his ledgers will become evidence. If his books are clean, he will be asked to assist. If not, he may be reassigned, or worse. He opens a bamboo ledger from last quarter. The numbers are perfect, too perfect. He didn't record a discrepancy noted by an inspector. It was minor at the time. Now that minor gap could become a noose. He picks up his brush, considers revising the line, but he hesitates. What happens when the pencil must erase the truth to protect the man holding it? The morning in Yangzhou begins with the scent of mildew and old paper. Rain fell in the night, soaking the wooden beams of the Salt Distribution Commission Hall and dampening the rows of salt ledgers like the skin of an aging fruit. Inside, Liu Wengsu arrives early. He always does. His brush, still wrapped in oiled cloth, is unrolled and checked. He smooths the rough surface of his bamboo desk, inspecting it for ink splotches. This is the desk where he writes the salt's journey into law. The air is damp, but the paper must remain dry. The numbers must align. The illusion must hold. Because in the Qing dynasty, salt is more than a commodity. It is bureaucracy itself made tangible. It is the lifeblood of taxation, policy, and favor. It is power disguised as seasoning. An inspector arrives. Word arrives just past the 5th morning bell. An inspector is en route from Nanjing. He represents the Board of Revenue, the ministry responsible for overseeing salt affairs across the empire. His name is Chen Zhen, and Liu knows his type. Sharp-eyed, quick with quotations from the classic of documents, and more importantly carrying a list of names already under suspicion. Liu rises from his desk. He gathers last season's ledgers. Each page must be reviewed. Each brushstroke must align. For the next several days, the truth matters less than the appearance of thoroughness. In the salt administration, perfection is a defense, not against dishonor but against political exposure. The gray salt market. Though the salt monopoly is sacred in name, in practice it leaks at every seam. Merchants bribe to acquire extra tickets beyond quota. Boatmen skim off excess during river transit. Depot overseers mix clean salt with lower-grade batches. Local officials quietly approve off-the-books exchanges in exchange for coin, favors, or silence. Everyone pretends this doesn't happen. Everyone knows it does. Liu himself once received a gift, an embroidered fan for approving a delayed shipment as arrived on time. He accepted it, then recorded the delay separately in a private notebook, not in the official log. He believes this protects him. But protection is never guaranteed, especially when inspectors arrive. Audit day. The hall is silent as Chen Zhen enters, robed in dark silk, hair bound tight. He carries a lacquered box containing his own brush and seals a gesture that says, "I am not here to borrow yours. I am here to judge them." Chen reviews Liu's ledgers without speaking. He flips pages with one finger, browses the register of tickets issued in Wuhu, pauses. Why is the ticket 42,719A marked as fulfilled? Yet the depot report shows no matching arrival. Liu's stomach tightens. Ticket 42,719 AA42, Dan's salt license issued to a trader named Shen Yuan had been recorded 2 months ago. The physical delivery was delayed due to high water on the Grand Canal. Liu had approved it preemptively, trusting Shen's history and the promise of compensation. He had not corrected it when the salt arrived late. Liu replies evenly. The shipment was delayed but confirmed by the depot last week. I had not yet logged the late report, waiting for the official seal to accompany the message. It's a carefully worded lie. Chen nods, he says nothing. Liu adds the missing update into the margin of the logbook as Chen watches. Smooth brushstrokes, unhurried, as though the error was never an error, only a delay in reporting. In this world, to survive is to write the truth before someone else writes your failure. The Trader's Circle. That evening, Liu attends a private gathering hosted by Merchant Kayan, one of the 7 most influential salt traders in Lianghua. The room smells of plum wine and roasted duck. Lanterns flicker, casting long shadows across brocaded robes. Merchant Kayan leans in and speaks low. The inspector will be leaving in 3 days. He's been gifted appropriately, but he mentioned your name. Liu doesn't respond. He sips his wine, tasting not sweetness but leverage. Kayan continues. We would like you to speak favorably about the ticket system's efficiency. We want the board to believe the problem is not in distribution, but in transport. In exchange, he offers Liu 10 bolts of silk, or a recommendation for a cousin's marriage to a minor official's daughter, a favor that, in this world, holds more weight than silver. Liu nods. He says he will think about it. But he already knows. He will write the report exactly as Kyan suggests, because Kyan funds the boatmen. Kyan keeps the depot afloat, and in the dance of governance, official ink must move in harmony with merchant gold. A missing ticket. Later that week, a crisis arrives quiet and sharp. One salt ticket, logged 3 weeks ago, has disappeared. It was stored in the lower drawer of the ledger cabinet, marked and sealed, awaiting verification. Now it's gone. No record of transfer, no note, no reissue. Liu closes the cabinet slowly. He breathes through his nose. He has 2 choices. Admit the loss, which opens him to accusations of negligence or theft. Recreate the ticket, forge the missing stamp, and enter it retroactively into the log. He chooses the second. The ink dries without smudge. The seal, carved by his uncle 20 years ago, leaves a crisp imprint. The forgery is perfect. He updates the log, dates it for the original entry, and adds a small correction note about an earlier misfiling. No one questions it, because no one wants to find the real error. The salt beneath the empire. By week's end, the inspector leaves. He praises the diligence of the records. He remarks on the transparency of Yangzhu's Salt Bureau. He recommends Liu for commendation. Liu receives a new fan. He returns to his desk. He smooths the surface. He sharpens his brush. He opens his private notebook and adds an entry. Ticket 42,980Z forged, matched to depot report. Inspector accepted explanation. Merchant Kyan confirmed repayment through gift. He closes the book, wraps it in cloth, hides it beneath the drawer. This is the true ledger, not the bamboo-bound pages, but the invisible one that sits in memory, guarded by fear and habit. Liu knows that the salt trade will continue long after he is dead, long after this emperor and the next. But it will not survive on justice or accuracy. It will survive on maintenance of illusion, of order, of bureaucratic silence. An unresolved weighing. One morning, a depot sends word. A shipment weighs significantly less than the ticket claimed. The clerk asks Liu if he should begin the discrepancy report. Liu pauses, considers the merchant involved, the season, the audience. Then he says, "Wait 2 days, it may resolve itself." But it never does. And as he stares out the office window, watching barges disappear into the river fog, Liu wonders how much truth has been lost to delay, and how many dynasties depended on no one noticing. The Grand Canal flows quietly past the city of Yangzhou, its wide surface smooth and untroubled. Barges laden with sacks of salt, covered in waxed cloth and dusted white at the seams, drift northward toward Shandong, Hebei, and the hungry cities near Beijing. For most observers, this is nothing unusual. Just another morning in one of the empire's busiest trade hubs. But for Liu Wengsu, senior clerk of the Salt Distribution Commission, it is the calm before a storm. Because earlier this week, a letter arrived. Sealed in red, it bore the mark of the Board of Revenue in Beijing. Inside, 2 sentences. A formal investigation into the Lianghui distribution records will begin in early autumn. Please prepare all ledgers, supporting documentation, and certified transport statements for review. The scribe's burden. Liu sits at his desk motionless. He rereads the letter. Then he carefully folds it, places it in his bottom drawer, and locks it. His first instinct is not fear, but inventory of numbers, of records, of people. He begins to mentally map the paper trail. The forged ticket from last quarter. The off-the-book salt weight, adjusted on depot reports. The favored merchant accounts, shifted between quarters for balance. the discrepancy left unresolved, now sealed into the illusion of truth. None of these are crimes. Not yet. Not unless someone asks the wrong question at the wrong time. And that is what inspections do best. The ghost of a clerk. A whisper reaches Liu through one of the junior scribes. Zhao Ming, a former clerk in the Wuhu depot, has been arrested. He was named in a complaint from a merchant who claimed bribes were requested and shipments were shorted. Zhao has disappeared into the maw of an internal audit. His fate is unknown, but Liu has seen this before. A man is arrested. His colleagues are questioned. Ledgers are reread with fresh suspicion. Eventually something is found, it always is. And then he is replaced. Zhao's handwriting appears in at least 3 ledgers Liu signed. If the investigators trace those documents back, he knows what could follow. The quiet rearrangement. Liu begins to re-edit the truth, quietly and precisely. He retrieves last season's register and begins smoothing its margins with a warm iron. Over the course of the next week, he removes anomalies in shipment dates by rewriting them with matching seal ink. Adds extra verification stamps from a now-retired inspector, forging them from a template he once copied for training. Creates a discrepancy memo, backdated and filed as if it had always existed, explaining an off-weight salt batch as the result of improper drying, not fraud. Deletes all references to ticket 42980Z, the forged one, from the main register. Instead, he transcribes a replacement, issued under similar terms with just enough plausible error to obscure scrutiny. None of this is reckless, none of it feels strange. In the salt bureaucracy, this is what survival looks like. A visit from the merchant. One evening, Merchant Kayan visits Liu's modest home under the guise of delivering a mooncake gift box ahead of the Mid-Autumn Festival. It is not festival time. They both know this. Kayan sits on a low stool, folds his hands. I have heard the investigation may dig deep. Yes, Liu replies. If they look at Wuhu's shipments, they'll find noise. They will find what the paper says. Kayan nods. He reaches into his sleeve and pulls out a small golden hairpin, inlaid with turquoise, a gift, a payment, or a preemptive apology. I hope, Kayan says softly, that the paper continues to say the right things. Liu takes the hairpin, not as a bribe, as confirmation of an unspoken contract. When the ledger becomes the law. In the following weeks, Liu's preparations intensify. He builds a system of controlled narrative. He distributes pre-written statements to junior clerks. He files corrections to old records, using ink that mimics the fade of age. He discards a small, unsuspicious volume of damaged tickets, claiming rat infestation. He tells himself none of this is deception. It is simply a continuity plan. The salt must flow. The trade must not be disrupted. Bureaucracy must appear whole. Because, in truth, the salt trade doesn't rely on integrity. It relies on belief. If the ledgers say the salt moved, it moved. If the tickets were paid, they were paid. If the seal is stamped, the story is real. And Liu, he is not a liar. He is the custodian of order. The investigation arrives. Autumn falls. The investigators from Beijing arrive, quiet men in gray robes, their expressions unreadable. Liu prepares the records personally. He submits cleaned ledgers, a summary of trade statistics, a report citing improved efficiency and minor discrepancies resolved, a list of retired personnel carefully curated. The investigators spend 2 days in the hall. They ask few questions. One takes notes on a silk scroll. Another examines seals under magnifying glass. A third says nothing and simply listens. They leave without incident. Later, a letter arrives. The Lianghui Salt Bureau has shown satisfactory compliance. No punitive action is necessary at this time. The Ledger and the Sea. That night Liu walks to the edge of the canal. The barges pass slowly. The water reflects the lanterns of distant homes. He carries one thing, a copy of the real ledger, his personal notebook, wrapped in oilcloth. He weighs it in his hand. Then, after a long breath, he lowers it into the water. The book sinks page by page, its secrets dissolving into the silt. The final line. Back at his desk the next day, Liu opens a new register. He dips his brush. He writes, "This quarter's salt tickets were issued without delay. All weights matched depot reports. All merchants compliant. The transport was smooth. The administration is efficient." And he ends with the same final line he always writes. The salt has moved. And in the Qing Empire, that is all that matters. It is 1385 in the hills just northeast of Kyoto, the imperial capital of Japan. The country is fractured. The Ashikaga shogunate rules in name, but warlords quarrel in the provinces. The court clings to ceremony while the real power flows through samurai blades. But beyond the city's rising smoke and aristocratic rituals, there is another world, a quiet one. You enter this world by following a narrow dirt path winding through cedar and pine trees, toward a modest temple on the hillside, a Shingon Buddhist complex, where the wind carries the sound of bells and the scent of sandalwood. This is the outer compound, home to novices and servants, far from the inner sanctum where senior monks debate philosophy and perform esoteric rites. And in one of the simple wooden dormitories, a boy named Shunei rises with the dawn bell to begin another day of stillness, repetition, and deeply boring, deeply sacred tasks. A life begins with chores. Shunei is 14 years old. He is thin, barefoot, and utterly ordinary. He came from a small village in Omi province, his family too poor to feed 5 mouths. A local headman arranged his entry into the temple as a novice, an act of mercy and a practical solution to hunger. He owns 2 robes, a bamboo comb, a prayer book, and a battered wooden pail. His morning begins before the sun fully rises. He joins the other novices in clearing the temple grounds, sweeping leaves from stone paths, scrubbing wooden thresholds with buckets of cold water, and stacking firewood for the kitchen hearth. They do not speak. They do not laugh. A novice's voice is to be used only for chanting, answering orders, or correcting mistakes, and even then sparingly. Shunei carries a basket of ashes from the temple hearth and scatters them into the moss garden, the same way he has for months. It is unbearably dull. And yet that is the point. The structure of stillness. The daily schedule is carved into wooden boards outside the main hall. It never changes. Before sunrise, wake, clean, bow, prepare. Sunrise bell, morning sutras in the main hall. After sutras, rice porridge served in silence. Mid-morning, study the Hanya Shingyo Heart Sutra and copy it by hand. Noon, midday meal, followed by silent rest. Afternoon, temple maintenance or garden duty. Evening, chanting, fire watch, sleep. There are no exceptions, no holidays, not even on festival days, especially not on festival days. A novice is not here to learn enlightenment. He is here to wear himself down, to erode the self by enduring sameness. It is not punishment, it is training. The monks above. Shunei rarely sees the senior monks. When they pass, he bows so deeply his forehead touches the floor. He knows them only by title. Josho the abbot, whose words are rare and final. Ryukin the ritualist, who performs fire ceremonies behind closed screens. Benmei the disciplinarian, who inspects the novice's handwriting without expression. The senior monks debate cosmic truths, the nature of suffering, and the intricate visualizations required in Shingon's esoteric meditations. Shunei, by contrast, practices folding his robe correctly and counting how many beans go into a monk's lunch bowl. Still, he is not bitter. He watches, listens, remembers. When a sutra is chanted, he follows the tones exactly. When an elder explains the role of a bell, how its resonance awakens awareness, he writes it in the margin of his prayer book. He may be a novice, but he is learning, even if no one notices. Copying the sutra. Mid-morning, Shun'ei sits cross-legged on the wooden veranda of the script hall. A low table in front of him holds a strip of washi paper, a small pot of ink, and a single brush. Today, he is to copy the Prajnaparamita H-letter 1E5B Daya Sutra, the Heart Sutra. Not for memory, for repetition, for discipline. He begins slowly. Chinese letter, 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 Chinese letter. The heart of the perfection of Wisdom Sutra. Each character must be perfect, not beautiful, that would be prideful, but precise. If he smudges the ink, he must start over. If he forgets a stroke, the page is discarded. If he finishes the page, it is rolled, placed in a wooden tube and stored beneath the altar, not for reading, but for offering. This is not calligraphy for art. It is devotion in monotony. And yet, as he writes, he begins to hear the sutra differently, not as a chant, but as something carved into his body. A bell, a shadow. As he finishes the final line, the great bronze temple bell sounds low and resonant, vibrating through the floorboards. It is the midday bell. All work stops. The novices bow once, stand, and move in formation toward the meal hall. Shun'ei follows. But just before entering, he sees something he cannot name. A shadow moving behind the inner curtain of the main ritual hall, a place novices are forbidden to enter. It is not fear he feels, it is curiosity. What happens in that room? What chants are spoken behind closed screens? What flames are tended out of sight? He lowers his head and enters the meal hall, but the image lingers. A flicker of light, the sound of beads, and a scent burning cedar. The monastic silence. Lunch is rice, boiled greens, and pickled radish. The hall echoes only with the sound of chewing and swallowing. Each monk bows before and after eating. Shun'ei eats slowly, savoring each bite. Not because the food is good, it's not, but because each bite exists. It was grown, harvested, cooked, and served by hands like his. Nothing is wasted, no leftovers, no loud gulps. After the meal, he returns his bowl to the stone basin, rinses it 3 times, and places it upside down in the drying rack. The act is so habitual that he no longer thinks about it. That too is the goal. A question forms. In the quiet of the afternoon, Shun'ei tends to the moss garden, brushing leaves from the narrow paths between stone lanterns. As he works, his mind drifts to the shadow behind the curtain, the whispered prayers, the flames he's only heard about. He wonders, is the real temple behind the curtain? Or is it out here in the dirt under his nails, in the ink stains on his sleeve, in the repetition that no one notices? He does not ask aloud. A novice never questions. But the thought lingers, and he begins to wonder if the greatest secrets of the temple are not hidden from him, but are hidden in plain silence, waiting to be endured. It is late autumn in Kyoto, and the leaves have begun their slow descent into fiery reds and ochres. From the temple hillside, one can just glimpse the rooftops of the city below, shrouded in a faint haze of chimney smoke and morning mist. Shun'ei watches these rooftops only for a moment each day, during his brief walk between the script hall and the firewood store. Even then, he knows not to stare too long. The world beyond the temple is considered a distraction. He has not seen his family in nearly 3 years. He is not supposed to think of them. The life of a novice monk in a Shingon monastery is not built for excitement. It is built for erasure. And yet that same structure now presses on his thoughts, harder than before. Because that shadow behind the ritual curtain, The brief glimpse of the sacred will not leave him. Monastic promotion in theory. At 15, Shane is eligible to advance beyond his initial role as a Zajan outer gate novice. Theoretically, he could be considered for service as a ritual assistant within the inner temple precincts. This is where esoteric rites are performed, Goma fire ceremonies, visualizations of mandalas, and the chanting of dharani that require perfect memorization. But entry into that circle is not guaranteed. It depends on discipline, silence, obedience, and also on whether a senior monk finds you useful enough to lift. So Shane continues his labor, fetching well water each morning before dawn, copying the Heart Sutra every 3 days without error, feeding the fire of the communal bath furnace each night. He does each task precisely, consistently, invisibly. He thinks this might be the path in, but he's not sure if he's being noticed, or if he's already being passed over. A new duty, cleaning the ritual hall. One week unexpectedly, Shane is summoned by Benmei, the senior disciplinarian. You will clean the outer floor of the Hondo, the main hall, Benmei says. Do not enter past the red cord. Do not speak to the altar. Do not look directly at the Goma pit. Shane bows deeply. This is a minor honor, cleaning the hallway outside the sanctum, the room where the esoteric rituals are performed. He will not see the ceremony itself, but he will stand closer to the silence that holds it. The next morning, barefoot and with a soft bristle broom in hand, Shane kneels at the edge of the red cord. His sweeping is slow, methodical. The floor smells of charcoal, wax, and something older, a bitter herbal scent that clings to the air like incense that was burned weeks ago. He does not look up, but he hears a crackle like wet wood catching flame. A low chant, the syllables strung together in Sanskrit-inflected Japanese. The faint chime of metal instruments, vajras, bells, and ritual staffs. Behind the curtain, the Goma ritual is being performed. Fire and visualization, purification and transformation. Shane imagines it, though he knows he should not. A seated monk before the altar, a ring of flames, the offering of wooden slats bearing worldly desires which are burned to ash. He wonders, will he ever be allowed to see it? Or is his life meant to orbit the sacred without ever touching it? The elder monk who watches. Later that week, Shane is again near the Hondo, replacing melted candle bases. As he works, he feels a presence behind him, a quiet gaze. He turns his head slightly and sees Ryukin, the ritualist monk, a man of few words, cloaked always in dark robes with a small string of bone-colored prayer beads at his wrist. Ryukin does not speak. He watches for several breaths, then simply nods once and walks on. The moment is small, but for Shane it lands heavily. He has been seen, and perhaps for the first time acknowledged. The question of the world outside. That evening during fire watch duty, Shane sits beside the bathhouse furnace, feeding cedar sticks into the coals. Outside, cicadas chirp. The temple walls creak in the cooling air. Another novice, older, sits beside him. They rarely speak, but tonight the older boy whispers. My uncle says Kyoto is full of starving men now. Too many samurai, not enough rice. Shane nods, unsure what to say. They are not supposed to speak of Kyoto or of samurai or of unrest, but the boy continues. Do you think we'll ever leave? Or do we grow old here, reciting the same chants until we die? Shane doesn't answer. Not because he disagrees, but because he doesn't know. He wonders, what happens to a monk who never reaches enlightenment? Does the ritual still matter if no one truly understands it? The scroll without words. Days later, Shane is asked to deliver a parcel to the archive monk, an elder who catalogs and repairs ancient scrolls stored in a locked cedar hall. He enters, bows, and places the parcel on a low table. Before he can leave, the old monk gestures. "Take that one," he says, pointing to a rolled scroll near the shelf. "Bring it to the abbot, carefully, do not open it." Shane obeys. As he carries the scroll wrapped in aged silk, sealed with a dull wax emblem, he feels its weight, not physical but spiritual. The scroll emits no sound, no warmth, no scent. But he imagines. What if there is nothing written on it? What if it is just the act of carrying, carefully, silently, that makes it sacred? This, perhaps, is the lesson of the novice. A quiet defiance. That night, Shane sits beneath the eaves of the dormitory after lights out. Rain falls softly. He thinks of the shadow behind the curtain. He thinks of the fire ceremony he cannot see. He thinks of the scroll he was not allowed to open. And in the dark, without speaking, he recites the Heart Sutra to himself but adds one line of his own. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. The unseen shapes the scene. It is not from the canon, but it feels true. And he wonders, if one repeats the sacred enough times, does the sacred ever respond? Winter arrives early in the Temple Hills. A light frost clings to the cedar bark, and the water drawn from the well chills Shane's fingers to the bone. He does not complain. Monks do not complain. The fires burn longer in the evenings now. The air is thick with incense and smoke. The days grow shorter, but the routine remains unchanged. In fact, it seems even more rigorous, as if repetition can warm the bones better than kindling. Shane is nearing his 16th year. He has served 2 full cycles of the temple calendar, memorized the entire Heart Sutra, and copied it by hand more than 100 times. His handwriting is now clean, precise, devoid of style. A perfect, featureless script. He has been seen, but he is still not inside. Not yet. The offer. It comes without warning. During morning sutra chanting, the abbot himself, Josho, a man of distant legend, steps into the rear of the hall. When the final gong fades, he speaks in a voice as dry as ash. "Shane, you will assist Ryukin in the preparation for Goma purification at the next new moon." Shane bows. He says nothing, but his heart stirs. He is to cross the red cord. He is to enter the inner sanctum. Not as a monk, not as a ritual master, as a servant of the rite. But that is enough. Entering the inner hall. The hondo, the main ritual hall, is dark, even at midday. Lanterns flicker behind rice paper screens. Candles burn low on polished brass altars. Shane kneels in silence as Ryukin explains the roles. Fetch water in silence. Place the Goma wood slats in ritual order. Light the outer candles. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look into the flame. The fire is not yours to see, Ryukin says. It is the teacher, not the student. Shane bows again. His hands tremble as he accepts the lacquered tray that will carry the wooden prayer tablets. Each tablet bears a word, a desire, a name offered by laypeople who have paid for the ritual. The monks burn these desires. They rise as smoke to the realm of Kyukai, the eternal teacher. That is the belief. Shane doesn't know if it's true, but he believes in the act itself. The day of fire. On the new moon, the temple is silent before sunrise. Snow has dusted the rooftops. The stone path to the hondo glows faintly under torchlight. Inside, Shane kneels beside the altar. Ryukin sits cross-legged before the fire pit, a small bowl of sesame oil beside him. He dips his fingers into the oil, presses them to his brow, and begins the chant. Homonojishiki na yori. The ritual has begun. Shane passes the prayer tablets, one by one. Ryukin intones each name, some in Japanese, some in Sanskrit transliteration, then casts the wood into the flame. The fire grows, it dances, it sings. The scent of cedar, ash, and camphor fills the hall. The walls tremble with the sound of bells and rhythmic drumming. Ryukin's voice grows louder, not in volume but in presence. Shane forgets himself. He looks into the fire, and what he sees is nothing. No gods, no visions, no swirling energies. Only flame. Only wood reduced to smoke. Only silence between each chant. The crack in the practice. After the ritual ends, Shane helps gather the ashes. He pours them into a lacquered urn, labeled with a single brushstroke. Chinese letter Ku, emptiness. Ryukin says nothing as they clean, but as Shane folds the fire cloth, the elder monk speaks. You looked into the flame. Shane freezes. I'm sorry. Ryukin nods once, not in anger, in acknowledgement. It is not forbidden, it is just unnecessary. And then he walks away. Shane kneels alone in the dimness, holding the fire cloth. The heat has left the room. The echoes of bells have faded. He realizes something. The sacredness was never in the fire. It was in the structure that held it. The silence, the discipline, the meaningless details repeated until they became something more. The final lesson. Weeks pass. Shane is not promoted, he is not shunned. He returns to his duties, copying sutras, hauling wood, sweeping paths. But something in him has shifted, not elevated, just clarified. He begins to see ritual in the everyday. A folded robe becomes a mandala of cloth. A grain of rice served in silence becomes offering. The act of bowing repeated 100 times a day becomes a mirror of humility. He realizes the inner sanctum is not the only sacred space. The monastery itself is a mandala, and he is already inside it. A reflection on the unseen. One morning, as he lights the lamp in the script hall, he opens a blank scroll, not to copy, not to chant. To write. He writes not in the formal kanji of the sutras, but in his own hand. I do not understand the fire, but I understand the man who carries the firewood. And perhaps that is enough. He signs nothing. He places the scroll back on the shelf, tucked among the unfinished copies. Someone may find it, or no one may. But the act of writing it like the fire is not for result. It is for presence. The bell rings again. The evening bell tolls across the temple grounds, echoing into the falling snow. Shane bows once toward the inner hall, where the ritual fire has long since burned out. He turns toward the dormitory, his steps steady, silent, and entirely his own. And in the fading sound of the bell, he thinks, perhaps enlightenment is not found in the hidden hall, but in learning how to bow without knowing why. It is the winter of 137 CE, and the wind sweeping across the northern frontier of the Roman Empire cuts like a blade. The landscape is bleak rolling hills, sodden moors, and skeletal trees bowing under gray skis. This is Britannia, but not the civilized, wine-sipping Britannia of the southern villas. This is the edge, the end of empire. Here stands Hadrian's Wall, a 73-mile-long fortification stretching from the river Tyne in the east to the Solway Firth in the west. It was built under the orders of Emperor Hadrian to mark the northern boundary of Roman rule. To many in Rome, it is a forgotten border. To the men stationed here, it is their entire world. Among them is Gaius Marius Verus, a second-class auxiliary soldier in his 5th year of service. He is stationed at Milecastle 34, a squat stone structure nestled between two long stretches of wall, somewhere west of the modern-day town of Collarford. His job is to watch and wait. A soldier by circumstance. Gaius Marius is not Roman by birth. He is from a farming family near Lugdunum in Gaul, modern-day Lyon, France. When his father couldn't pay a tax levy, Gaius was pressed into the auxiliary ranks, a common fate for provincials who weren't Roman citizens. He was promised citizenship after 25 years of service. So far he's done 5, 20 remain. He can read, he can write, But his job is not glamorous. He does not command legions. He does not march in triumph. He stands guard in the sleet, checks the condition of the wall, and records foot traffic through the small northern gates. Most days no one comes. And yet every hour he climbs the stone stairs of the watchtower, looks north into the mists, and notes what he sees. The wall itself. Hadrian's wall is not a single uniform structure. It is a system of defenses. A stone wall, typically 10 feet wide and up to 15 feet high in sections. Milecastle's small fortified gateways placed approximately every mile. Turrets between each Milecastle, manned by rotating soldiers. The vallum, a large earthwork ditch to the south of the wall. Each Milecastle contains a gate, sometimes blocked, sleeping quarters for about 816 men, and a watch platform. They are cramped, cold, and built for utility. Gaius' life is lived within a few dozen paces. He sleeps in a stone barrack, eats from wooden bowls, and uses a pit latrine. There is no luxury, only structure. A day in the life. At sunrise, Gaius begins his shift by inspecting the gate and the northern trail. His orders are simple: observe, document, and only intervene when necessary. His tools: a worn wax tablet for daily logs, a small oil lamp for night watch, a short sword rarely used, a cloak that no longer keeps out the rain. He shares duties with 6 other men, all from different corners of the empire: a former blacksmith from Thrace, a quiet Numidian who barely speaks Latin, and a fiery Spaniard who resents the cold. They rotate shifts every 4 hours. The commanding officer at the nearby fort at House Steads visits once every few weeks. Supplies arrive monthly. News arrives less often. The quiet enemy. There are no great battles at the wall, not here. The so-called barbarians beyond the wall, likely tribes like the Vatadini or Selgovi, do not often mass for war. Instead, they harass, raid, disappear into the mists. Once in the summer, Gaius saw a group of painted warriors on horseback in the distance. They didn't come close. They didn't need to. The wall itself is more than defense. It is a symbol, a line drawn by the empire saying, "Beyond this, civilization ends." Gaius sometimes wonders whether it's really the other way around. Letters from no one. In a rare moment of solitude, Gaius writes a letter on a thin sheet of wood, using a stylus. To Julia, if you still reside in Lugdunum. I have not heard from you since the harvest festival of my 2nd year here. I do not know if you married, or if you remember me. I do not know if I write this for you, or to remember I can write at all. He will send it if the courier comes. But the last one died of fever at Vindolanda 2 months ago. Still, the act of writing soothes him. Winter approaches. As December sets in, the wall becomes less a defense and more a test of endurance. Snow piles at the base. The mortar between stones cracks with frost. Fires are kept low to save fuel. Gaius wraps his sandals in rags. He adds animal fat to his porridge for warmth. He begins to see visions in the snow figures on the ridge that vanish when he blinks. Some of the men say they hear whispers from the forests at night. Gaius doesn't believe in ghosts, but he does believe in isolation and what it can do to a man. He begins carving notches into a beam above his bunk, one for every full moon. He does not count the days, only the moons. Something in the fog. On one evening patrol just before dusk, Gaius climbs the tower alone. The fog is thick, stretching for miles over the moor. The only sound is the low groan of the wind. Then faint but clear a horn blows. Not a Roman horn, not one he recognizes. He peers north, the fog shifts. For a brief moment he sees movement, not cavalry, not warriors. Figures on foot, moving with purpose, not toward the wall but along it, watching, measuring. Then the fog thickens again, and they vanish. He records it in his log. No one else saw. No one believes him. but he begins keeping his sword a little closer at night. The weight of the wall. By now, Gaius has stood at this Mile Castle longer than he stood in his father's home. He can recite the weekly schedule from memory. Monday, wall inspection. Wednesday, ration inventory. Sunday, correspondence writing, if ink available. Every day, remain alive. No glory, no battles, no monuments. But he begins to suspect that this is how Rome holds itself together, not through senators or emperors, but through men like him, stationed at the edge, doing nothing memorable for years at a time. An unanswered question. That night, as he lies under a moth-eaten blanket, he scratches a line into the wax tablet. If a soldier watches a wall for 20 years and no one ever crosses, did the wall defend anything? Or did the soldier merely preserve the illusion of safety? He stares at it, then wipes it clean. A new year has arrived, 138 CE. Gaius Marius Verus does not know it is a new year until a passing supply runner from the Vindolanda fort mentions that word has come. Emperor Hadrian is dead. In Rome, this news means mourning, statues draped in black, a new emperor to flatter. But here at Mile Castle 34 it means nothing. No orders change, no rations shift, no gate hinges are oiled anew. For Gaius and his cohort, time is no longer kept by emperors. It is marked in coal ash, frost lines and foot blisters. The shifting garrison. One of the 6 men at the watchtower is transferred south. Another, the old Thracian, is found dead in his bunk, still holding his wool cloak around him. He is buried behind the Vallum ditch. No ceremony, just a brief murmur of prayer. Replacements arrive from the nearby Coria outpost. 2 young recruits. One is barely 16 and vomits in the latrine during his first cold night. The other asks too many questions. Gaius becomes the senior by default. He doesn't want command, he wants consistency. He begins carrying the logbook himself, not because he's ordered to, but because it gives him control over the narrative. A sense that someone is recording what happens out here, even if no one will ever read it. Small rituals. In a place like this, it's not the sword that protects your sanity, it's the rituals. Wrapping the leather greaves just so. Inspecting the north gate's latch each morning. Scraping lichen from the wall with a precise stone. Sharpening a blade that will never draw blood. These are not orders, these are anchors. And yet, even in these habits, the silence creeps in. The birds fly lower. The fog stays longer. The wind seems to whisper in a language Gaius can almost recognize, a tongue he never learned but might have once heard as a child in the fields of Gaul. He wonders, is the land itself trying to reclaim this wall? Is it whispering reminders that Rome is a guest here, not a ruler? Encounters at the gate. One morning, the gate is approached by a group of traveling traders Celts from the south, speaking a Latin laced with thick regional accents. They bear permits from the fort at Vindolanda, valid for passage. Gaius inspects their goods: furs, carved bone, dyed wool, and something unusual, a small pouch of painted stones with spiral symbols. Charms, says one of the traders, to keep out the dead. Gaius says nothing, he allows them through. That night he finds one of the stones placed beside the north gate, on the ground. None of his men admit placing it there. He doesn't remove it. The long watch. By early spring the days grow longer but no warmer. Rain replaces snow. The wall leaks through every seam. During a 3-day storm, the watchtower floods at the base. Gaius and his men spend hours bailing water with wooden bowls. Their boots rot from the inside out. One man goes missing for half a day. They find him seated behind the turrets, staring into the mist. He doesn't speak for 2 weeks. The boredom is worse than fear. At least fear is useful. Boredom rots the senses. Gaius begins reading scraps of old Roman poetry, left behind in a weathered scroll case. He recites lines from Ovid into the wind, his voice barely audible. The snowdrift weighs heavy. Yet I endure, nameless, beneath empire's reach. He makes up the second line. It feels more real than anything he's read. Rumors from the west. A messenger from Malcastle 46 stops overnight. He shares ale and tailies. They say a full company of Picts crossed at night near the western end, left 3 dead and vanished into fog. Gaius doesn't believe it, not entirely, but he notes it in the log. What he does believe is the sense of withdrawal, as if Rome is slowly drawing back its breath, waiting to exhale and abandon this frontier. He has seen fewer patrols, fewer supply carts, fewer clean tunics, and more men who drink in silence instead of talking. The empire may not have left, but it is no longer fully here. The visitor. One night on watch, Gaius sees a figure approaching the gate, hooded, unarmed, moving with slow deliberation. Protocol says he must call out, raise the alarm, challenge. But something stops him. The figure stands at the gate for only a moment, lays something gently on the threshold, and walks north into the mist. Gaius approaches and finds a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside, a wooden figurine, crude, carved in a Celtic-style, a man, seated, holding a staff. It's not Roman, but it's peaceful. He leaves it on the windowsill of the tower. No one mentions it, but no one touches it either. The edges of memory. As spring blooms slowly, Gaius begins dreaming of things he can't recall. A field of sunflowers in Gaul, though he doesn't remember ever seeing one. A voice calling his name in Greek. A warm bath. He wakes with the smell of peat smoke and moldy wool in his nose. He wonders if his real life ended before he came here, and this is some afterlife of waiting. He writes nothing in the log that day, only draws a spiral, a question unspoken. As he sharpens his sword one morning, the younger recruit, now weathered by 5 months of stone and sleet, asks softly, "Do you think we'll be remembered, any of us?" Gaius doesn't answer immediately. He wants to say yes. But instead, he looks up at the wall crumbling at the edges, moss creeping over the joints, and replies, "If they remember the wall, they will have forgotten the hands that held it." The boy nods. That's enough. The summer of 138 CE brings an odd stillness. The wind continues to howl over the hills, and the sun, when it appears, casts long golden streaks across the wall's rugged surface. But something else lingers now, a kind of waiting, like a breath held too long. The death of Hadrian, once a distant footnote, has begun to echo even here. His successor, Antoninus Pius, is said to be pulling Roman influence further south, focusing on a new wall, the Antonine Wall, being built some miles into Caledonian land. Hadrian's wall, still manned, still inspected. But slowly, imperceptibly, it is being unmoored from memory. Gaius Marius Varus does not know this, not with certainty. But he feels it. The disintegration of routine. The logbooks now remain unwritten for days at a time. The census of patrols is submitted late, and without the usual ceremony. One of the newer men begins sleeping through his watch shifts. No punishment is issued. Another never returns from a brief excursion to the nearby stream. They find no body, no tracks, just absence. "He went north," one soldier mutters. "He went home," another shrugs. No one corrects either claim. The wall still stands, the Malcastle still functions. But the idea of Rome begins to feel less like law and more like a rumor, fading, distorted, unimportant. Fatting letters and broken seals. Gaius still writes, not daily, not for duty, but because the act feels stabilizing. His stylus drags across the wax with a familiar rhythm, though the words increasingly veer from reports and toward memory. One such entry. "They have stopped numbing the fog. We used to call it horse breath, spear curtain, milk from the sky. Now we simply let it pass unspoken. He tries once more to send a letter south to Julia, whom he once imagined as a tether to a past life. The courier never arrives. The message remains sealed, bound with a string of twine he braided himself. He places it in the wooden chest under his bunk. If it is ever delivered, it won't be by his hand. The final patrol. Late in summer, orders arrive. A detailed inspection of the western reaches of the wall is to be conducted. Gaius and 2 others are assigned to accompany a supply officer from Korstapidum. The march is long, damp, and uneventful. They pass other outposts, Milecastle 35, 36, and beyond, each slightly more worn than the last. Fewer men, less order, more open gates. At Milecastle 40, they find it abandoned. Food left uneaten, bedrolls in place, but no men, not even blood, just wind and wildflowers growing through the cracks in the floor. Desertion, the officer suggests. Gaius says nothing, but he notes how the vines climb the stones as if they'd been waiting. The conversation of stones. Upon returning, Gaius begins to spend long hours sitting on the rampart, watching the northern horizon. He talks aloud, not to the men, but to the wall itself. "You remember more than any of us," he says softly. "You watched men arrive and vanish. You heard vows made and forgotten. One morning he carves into the inner side of the rampart a message, in Latin. Sub silentio stamus. We stand in silence. He does not sign it. He has stopped thinking of posterity. A sudden decision. In early autumn, Gaius makes a decision that startles even himself. He removes the letter to Julia from the chest. He packs only what he can carry: the worn cloak, a dagger, a handful of dried chickpeas, the small wooden Celtic figurine left months ago at the gate. At dawn, he stands at the north gate. He does not look back. The younger recruit asks quietly, "You're deserting?" Gaius shakes his head. "I'm not leaving Rome. Rome left already. I'm just following." He walks north. Not fast, not fearfully. Simply forward.